Well, they'll try to, and, people seem to gobble it up. But when you think about the leadership of both parties endorsed this, remember when the vote came up on that, our two candidates, Republicans and Democrats, they rushed back and they both voted for this. So, the whole system, whether it's the Federal Reserve System and the excessive spending, there's a little bit of talk, but no real action. So it's a shame. This is why I'm pessimistic on the short run, believing that nothing is going to be changed out here. The deficits and the spending will not come under control, but hopefully our message of freedom and liberty and sound money will get out because it's growing by leaps and bounds, that we can at least offer the answer when we have a currency crisis. And that's going to be the most important thing, that when we have to rebuild this system, we rebuild it with some common sense rather than this fraudulent system that just encourages the benefits to all these special interests.
Well, one of the most important pieces of legislation to Freedom Watch viewers is yours to audit the Fed. What is your feeling, optimistic or pessimistic, that at some time in 2010, in some form, it will reach the president's desk? What do you think?
Well, if it reaches his desk in some form, it'll probably be watered down a good bit. To have it reach his desk the way it is now, I believe it's such an important issue to the leaders of the country, the president, and Wall Street and others. I think it would be stopped because they're not going to allow this to happen. There's too many things. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg. This Goldman Sachs deal. I imagine there are hundreds of deals like this, and they've been going on for 30 years or more. So there's so much buried in there, and they're not likely to let this happen. That's like finding out every single thing the CIA has ever done over the last 30 years.
Earlier this week, there was an argument in federal court here in New York City in which Fox Business Network sued the Federal Reserve under the Freedom of Information Act to get a copy of all the documents in TARP. And I went to the oral argument. There were a number of people involved that were friends and colleagues of mine. And the government actually argued that if we reveal today in 2010 the nature of the TARP documents that we saw and dealt with in 2008, it would harm the banks. Harm the banks. The money's already been paid back. The banks have made a fortune. The banks are paying themselves billions in profits and in bonuses. What kind of an argument is that? Bottom line, Congressman Paul, I think Fox is going to win. I think the Second Circuit Court of Appeals is going to grant that Freedom of Information Act request. It'll go all the way to the Supreme Court, but I think we win this round, and that will help your Audit the Fed bill to pass.
But this is a good example of the citizens acting any way they can because they can't wait on Congress. I've been working at this for a long time, and we are making inroads. But because of these suits and what Fox has done, this has been very beneficial. So everybody has to get together. But because of the attention that Fox got from this lawsuit, I think has helped us a whole lot. It's a lot more difficult for anybody in the Congress to vote against. I think if there's an up and down vote in the Senate, they'll do what they did in the House. They're going to vote for this. And I hope that happens. I hope I'm not too pessimistic. There is a chance that would happen. I think what might happen is if they allow it to go through, they'll depend on the courts to protect them.
Right.
The courts, and this history rather well, the courts have not been good at protecting, sound money, and they've always protected the monopoly of the Federal Reserve and central banking.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right, but I'm glad to hear your optimism in this brand new year that we're in right now. Before I let you go, the president announced this morning, not directly but through somebody else, he's going to ask for another $40 billion to pay for the troops in Afghanistan. Where is the outrage on the left of his own party to A, the concept of an unlawful war, and B, funding the war like George W. Bush did on a credit card?
And then they wonder why there might be some pressure coming on our dollar. We're already under pressure, but it's going to get a lot worse. You just can't imagine where their thinking is. I mean, I'm always baffled by that. But they do it with a straight face, as you say. They just come back and say, well, this is $40 billion. What's the difference? We're already $1 trillion in deficit this year, so a little bit more won't hurt. But they always will qualify and say, we'll worry about the deficit later on, or we'll worry about inflation later on. But right now, there's a crisis, and we have to act, or the world will come to an end. Of course, we're in a financial crisis because we've been acting this way all along.
One more a question about abortion, Congressman Paul. Congressman Bart Stupak, the pro-life Democrat who leads a large group of pro-life Democrats in the House, insisting on language in the federal health care legislation that would prohibit the government from directly or indirectly paying for abortion, said if the Senate version comes to the House, the pro-life Democrats will vote against it. Do you think that's so? Do you think the issue of abortion, of all things, could possibly save us from the socialization of medicine in this country?
Wouldn't that be a wonderful irony for today, you know, that issue was able to wake some people up? So people would be voting our way for different reasons, but for a very important reason. And that's a possibility. I think when push comes to shove, he won't be able to hold all those votes. The question is I think he needs at least 40, but he had about 60 before. So he will have to keep a bunch of Democrats, with him. And that's an interesting phenomenon. So it may just turn out that the right to life issue gave us the right to maybe our free market medical care, at least move us in that direction or away from socializing our medical care.
So nicely put. Congressman Ron Paul, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.